Lord of the Rings has had quite a successful time in the gaming space. From the great movie games like EA's Two Towers and Return of the King, to the more recent Shadow of Mordor series. Even though there's not a ton of games within the IP, what's there tends to be quite good. Okay, maybe not that one. Back in the PS2 days, we often look back fondly on Two Towers and Return of the King, as well they're very good games. But one game I very rarely see looked at is the Fellowship of the Ring game. It's very much a different take on the IP, so instead of the epic battles of EA's titles, you'll be slowly exploring areas while trying to fend off enemies with sticks. Is this game a hidden classic, or is there a reason no one talks about it? The Fellowship of the Ring is a strange one. It came out about a month before the Two Towers game relating to the movie, but the Fellowship of the Ring is not a movie game. It has no relationship with EA's Lord of the Rings games. And this is because, from what I found out, the developers, in partnership with Tolkien Enterprises, held the rights to the video game's adaptations of the books, whereas EA held the rights to adaptations on New Line Cinema's movies. So this game is based purely off the book material and takes pretty much nothing from the movies, which I think makes it quite a unique game, as story beats that were missed in the movies do crop up here. To begin with, the game's presentation is all very dark, muddy, and a lot of the landscapes can be quite empty and bland at times. It has that very early 2000s PC game aesthetic, dark, muddy, but still somehow cozy and simple. You go through a lot of the classic locations through the game, and the Shire is where you begin. It does have a little bit of charm to it as hobbits go about their day, and it just feels very cozy. Almost like the starting town in an MMO. Little details like houses having street names and numbers on them makes the area feel lived in and that there's more going on than what's shown, as there isn't much going on. You'll only see a few NPCs knocking about the area, so let's just say everyone's not feeling the weather and staying in this day. The area of the Shire is not huge, but it does have two areas to it, so you can have a wander to the Green Dragon and talk to some locals, or explore Bag End and Frodo's home. After the Shire, the game does get very bland with the exception of Bree, as most areas are either forests or caves. Inside the Inn at Bree is one of the areas I did quite like, and purely because of the scale between the hobbits and the furniture. It just makes you sort of realise the perspective of the hobbits, and how they see the world. Music is also very generic, and that's about as much as I can write about the soundtrack. It's just very generic fantasy music, and nothing of it particularly stands out. Voice acting wise, it's okay. Obviously a different cast from the movies, but while looking at who is actually in the game, I did find some familiar names. We've got Tom Kane voicing Gandalf, who I recognise straight away as the dramatic narrator from the Clone Wars TV show.
Trimming the grass under the window.
Oh? The sound of shears stopped some time ago. How long have you been eavesdropping?
Eavesdropping? There ain't no eaves at Bag End.
Don't be a fool. What have you heard?
James Arnold Taylor, again of Star Wars fame as Obi-Wan, is taking on the role as Pippin. Quentin Flynn is another name I clocked in the credits, who takes on the role as Merry in this game, but you may recognise them as Raiden from Metal Gear.
All this way just for breakfast? Can't tell. It's a conspiracy.
Don't tell him. Oh, too late. Our conspiracy is unmasked. May as well tell him everything now.
Since you'll be walking past old Maggot's farm, we thought we'd have a go at his garden again.
3 is company, just like old times. Remember those mushrooms?
I remember his ferocious dogs.
The performances are okay. It's very flatly British. While talking to characters, something I kept noticing is how almost every conversation with someone, they are just standing there like they're about to tell you the weather or give you a PowerPoint presentation. It looks very awkward, and I don't know why they left so much dead space next to the characters in the conversations. It's like they were meant to have some sort of text bubble there instead, but there's nothing, so it looks really awkward. The game is a third-person adventure game. It's not very hack and slash like EA's titles. It's more clunky, deliberate, exploration focused. There's no combos to unlock or weapons to find. Each of the main playable characters has a set weapon and moveset, with Frodo being the exception as he moves on from using a stick to eventually using Sting. The game I was most relating this to while I was playing was the original Dark Souls. Not everything about the combat is Dark Souls. It was just some elements in how the combat would feel in practice. It just reminded me a lot of my first time adventuring through Dark Souls. The Souls comparison here is incredibly loose. But with this game's combat, you have to be very deliberate, commit to attacks, and if you whiff, you are normally punished by having a good chunk of your health bar be wiped out. There is no real lock-on. You just have to position yourself correctly and hope the enemy doesn't move too far away. You do have a block, though it does function like some games where it will reduce damage rather than negate it, which I have never liked. Dying is also very unforgiving. The game has no checkpoints or autosaves. It's all manual saves, and if you forget to save manually and perish, well, it's back to whenever you last saved, which can be incredibly annoying if it was miles away. Manually saving is also just not very smooth. It's slow, clunky, and with the amount of times you have to do it, it certainly adds up time-wise. I did find the game to be quite difficult at times. They throw a lot of enemies at you, and when you're playing as a little hobbit with a stick, there's not much in the way of defense or offense against an army of spiders. Luckily, you do have some NPCs that follow you around at times, so I use them to bully the local wildlife if the need arised. The hardest part of the game was trying to sneak past the Dark Rider in the Shire, as he has got incredible eyesight, and I was just seeing this screen a lot. The Balrog is also quite tough, as the dude just one-shots poor old Gandalf. You'll be fighting a variety of enemies, from wolves, orcs, trolls, the Balrog, and even Nazgul. What I found quite neat about the enemies is seeing how they differed from the movies, with trolls being the most notable example of this. In the movies they were very classic in their appearance, as trolls, but in this game they looked almost frog-like in their face, almost Witcher 3-esque. The monster outside the Mines of Moria is also a good example of this. With the movies, it looked very Kraken-like, and in this game it was almost like a dragon snake thing. It was quite cool to see how different people handled these monsters. The areas you explore are nicely varied as you go through the adventure, but there's nothing too fantastical. It is the beginning of the adventure, so everything is still very woodlands and cave-based. You'll be in the Shire, a forest, haunted hills and crypts, the Mines of Moria, and more hills and forests. The visuals of the game does make these areas feel a lot more samey than they probably needed to. Though if you're familiar with the books and where these places are meant to be, they do have some recognisable features. There are some puzzles in these areas, and it's real exciting stuff. Luckily there's not much of this, and most of your adventuring is just going from A to B, maybe looking for someone or something in an area. If you do forget what you're doing or get lost, the game offers absolutely no help. You have a map, not of your local area, but of Middle-earth. You do also have a quest log, which is something, but it doesn't explain a whole lot apart from find Sam in a giant forest. Around the areas, you'll be on the lookout for items such as the various healing items, as healing in this game is quite a privilege. There's not a whole lot of healing items in the game, and when you need it, you normally have to ram 60 mushrooms down Mr. Frodo's throat to heal up fully. You may have noticed that the game does include 3 playable characters. We have Frodo, who's unique in that he's the only one that can jump and sneak. Aragorn is very combat focused and not much else. And Gandalf, who is a wizard. So comparing him to the stick-wielding Frodo and the awkward combos of Aragorn, it's clear who's the best. Gandalf has multiple spells, including healing, so he's much more fun to play as. It's quite a power shift when you go from this to this. The story itself obviously follows that of the Fellowship of the Ring, but differs in some areas when compared to the movie. The biggest example of this is the inclusion of Tom Bombadil, who was absent from the movies, and if he's anything like this, we missed out on a treat. Meeting this man is like entering a different world. Life just turns into a musical, and not a very good one.
I'll chant his marrow cold if he don't behave himself. You let them out again, old man Willow. You should not be waking, eat earth, drink water, go to sleep. Bombadil is talking.
Wait, perhaps Tom is near. Oh, Tom Bombadil, oh, by water, wood and hill, by the reed and the willow, by fire, sun and moon. Hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us.
Well, little friends, old Tom has answered your call.
Other than that, the story here is mostly as you remember. just with the quirks of it being a low-budget video game. The reception of this game was, well, let's just say there was never a sequel to this specific game. Even though it reviewed quite averagely and sold pretty well, it was just heavily outsold by EA's titles, which, well, I get it. So is Fellowship of the Ring a lost classic? No, not really. It's clunky, has some awkward voice acting, and the game could get repetitive. But it's not that long. If you love Lord of the Rings and the deeper lore, or maybe want to see what could have been before EA's game took over, there is something here. The game is available on the PS2, Xbox and PC, so I can't imagine it's too hard to find. So if you're interested, you won't be putting yourself out of a large amount of money. Just be ready to save a lot. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.
Gandalf!